This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for ISMs. Now, many of you have asked, what does ISMs really mean? Well, I want to talk about the isms that are positive because we are living in a world that is just full of a lot of challenges. And the challenges sometimes are very, very destructive. And our first reaction probably is to hold our guard and start to get angry. We get red in the face. We think of all the four-letter words that we want to spew. But the reality of it is that's not going to resolve what we're going through. My guest today is Alison Pena, and Alison is a grief coach. And Alison, you hear people going through horrible personal challenges. And now we're in a world where their personal challenges, in some ways, are being pushed off to a side because there's this global challenge that we're living with. So, why don't you give us a little bit of background of number one, how you're handling it? Because, like I said, I want to yell and scream, but I'm learning not to. But how do you stop yourself from doing the wrong thing and doing the human right thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really, really challenging time. This administration really challenges and endangers many, many, many things that I care about. And I'm from New York. We know Trump. He has a set playbook that he's been running for decades. And the sort of natural human reaction when he does monstrous things is to be angry and to rage. But the fact of the matter is that he is going to do this for 4 years. And in order to be healthy ourselves at the end of these 4 years, we need to pace ourselves. And so for me, I'm spending a lot more time on self-care practices. Meditation, breathing, walking, because this is election grief. This is grief about what has our country come to? That this inhumanity is being cheered on. Like, who are we? That this person was elected. It makes no sense to me. And so one of the things that happens when we're grieving, especially in the early stages of grieving, and we're just 2 weeks into this, is that we get kind of paralyzed and overwhelmed by all the feelings. And it's hard to move, right? It's hard to take care of ourselves. It's hard to take care of the people we care about. It's hard to stand for the causes that we care for. And so it's really important to shift to what I call the tipping point. So there's the point where you're looking at the disaster that's happening in the backdrop. And then the tipping point is kind of where you face it. Okay, this is it. This is what we're looking at. I can scream and cry for 4 years, or I can decide that in the face of this place where I feel powerless, we all have power. We all have power. Because each of us has our own circle of influence where what we do makes a difference. And so at the point where you actually face this disastrous administration and the things that they're doing, then you're in a place where you can make some decisions and move forward. But there's so much, there's so much.
Well, I was thinking of you specifically the other day when I heard about all these services that he was globally cutting. And one was Medicaid. And I'm
Hmm.
thinking of you and your mother-in-law.
Yep.
Now, for those listening, you may not know, but Allison is the caregiver, basically the sole caregiver, if you think about it that way,
Yep.
um, of her mother-in-law. And she inherited her mother-in-law when her husband passed away. Now, most of us are hoping that somebody inherits us when we have a loss, but it was the reverse. And I just kept thinking, your mother-in-law is going to be what, 101?
She'll be 102 in May.
102.
Hmm.
She lives
Still
on
lives
her
at
own.
home.
You go there daily. You do have some outside sources,
Hmm.
but if everything is cut for the elderly, you're in a lot of hot water.
Yeah.
And it's like, we can't prepare for all these things. And those monies have been set aside for decades.
Hmm.
So when I heard it, I got angry and I wrote a post which I did not put up because I've learned when my anger is like that, write it, get it out, toss it.
Right.
Then I kept thinking, how are you managing? And does your mother-in-law even understand what's going on with this? Or are we keeping her a little separated from the bad news?
Yeah, no, she doesn't really understand what's going on. And I think that it's really important to bring it down to the small things. So, for example, I went to her place on Sunday and she had fallen on the floor. And, because she lives alone and has someone who comes for about 4 hours a day every day. And I hit the med alert because I couldn't lift her myself. And these fire department EMTs came to check her out because I wanted to make sure that she was okay.
Sure.
And this was in the back of my mind. Like, what if they don't come?
Right.
Right. And I think it's really, really important as we face all of these things that are happening that we just pick a lane. Like, what are we willing to fight for? What are we willing to be a roadblock to? Um, and what are we willing to sort of speak out for? Because we can't, each of us, take on all of the things that we care about. There's no way.
Right.
All of the things that this administration is going to attack, we can't do. But Target rolled back its DEI programs. So I'm not shopping there anymore. What I recommend in order not to scream for 4 years is to pick your own lanes. Like, what do you care about that you're willing to stand for? For me, it's stuff with the elderly. It's protecting the innocent. So in these immigration sweeps, the promise was that they would sweep up the criminals. After Trump freed and pardoned 600 violent offenders.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a contradiction, right? And in fact, they're not sweeping up criminals for the most part. They're sweeping up US citizens and veterans and Native American people who don't have the so-called right paperwork. So, this won't stand. It can't stand. But what it will require is for each of us in our own really small way. And it can literally be being kind to someone you wouldn't necessarily notice to be kind to. The flicker of a butterfly's wing. Everything matters.
Everything.
Everything matters. So in the face of inhumanity, being humane is a revolutionary act.
I read an article this morning that somebody had posted that they are planning a very peaceful demonstration in the Akron area this Sunday. And they specified, please, no, it must be peaceful. You can be on the opposite spectrum from us, but be peaceful, be human if you choose to come.
Right.
And I'm going to have her on this show next week because I want to know how peaceful we can really come together. And I think we can, okay? Whether you agree with the administration or not, okay? We don't have to come and fight with each other over it. In fact, for the last 4 years, we really didn't fight. Individuals didn't really fight with each other. We accepted what was going on. And if we didn't like it, we verbalized it. But it wasn't as contentious as it feels now.
Mm-hmm.
And it worries me because I'm living in a red state.
Yep.
Now, I have a lot of friends who are Republicans, and they are good human individuals. And if you voted for the administration, you are a good human. I'm not afraid of you. I'm going to keep you as my friend. But it's the ones who are out there trying to stab the rest of us in the back. So we have to be careful. But your first comment was define that inner circle. And that inner circle can keep growing as we all come together and span out.
Yeah. Another way to stay peaceful in yourself is don't engage with trolls. Just don't bother because they're not interested in having a dialogue. I had a very interesting conversation. I went out with my accountant and his wife. And in my world, I'm in a very blue state. I'm in New York. Pretty much everyone I know is a Democrat and despises Trump, honestly. I'll straight. I mean, there is nobody in my family I'm fighting with over our opinion of this administration. But I had lunch and kind of assumed that they did the same thing. And then his wife said I voted for him. And I rocked back in my chair. And it turned out that she was mad that they didn't get to see their grandson while COVID was on for a long time. And that really upset her. And she's an immigrant and she came the right way, and married an American man. And so she was offended by the immigrants who have come not legally.
Sure.
So that was her big issue. And I said, well, but what about all the sexist and racist and xenophobic things he said? She said, well, he doesn't really mean those.
Interesting.
And that was fascinating to me, honestly. That was absolutely fascinating. So she believed him on the immigration, but she didn't believe him on everything else he had said. And so now what's happening is that people who heard all that stuff, who were Trump fans, Trump voters, but said to themselves, but he doesn't mean me, are finding out that he did.
Well, they have to go back in history.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we just observed Holocaust Day.
Yep.
And I remember my parents telling me, and I'm very blessed, my parents my grandparents and even my great grandparents weren't in Europe during World War II. They were
Mhm.
safely here in the United States. But I remember my mother saying to me that just hearing what was going on, across the world, she
Yep.
said, made people come together. She said they didn't ask, are you Jewish? Are you Christian? Are you Muslim? It didn't make any difference.
Hmm.
They became neighbors and everybody worked together. And right before my mother passed away, it was in 2016, she made my brother and I promise that the orange man would not win. And I truly didn't believe he would.
Yep.
So I made that promise. And she passed away a month before he was elected. And I felt guilty for a couple of years. In fact, I
Mm.
went to grief counseling to get over that because I made a promise. Not that it was on my shoulders, but I felt like it was.
Yep.
I don't understand how we don't look at history and say, this either happened before
Yep.
or we were threatened that this would happen. How did we become so innocent to just sitting back and letting somebody take control?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, there was a whole lot of collusion. So Trump would not be president without Mitch McConnell. He wouldn't. Mitch McConnell did the wrong thing over and over and over again at pivotal moments. So he spoke very loud about January 6th, and then he refused to vote to convict. So when the rubber met the road, he did the wrong thing. He took the wrong fork for the sake of power over and over again and over again. And so then Trump's power expanded and he grew this movement. And here we are, right? So he doesn't exist in a vacuum. He exists in a bunch of complicit people who went along, who just went along. And so kind of the question for me for the next 4 years for people like us is, first of all, how do we build the bridges? And I think the bridges are built on small things, like compassion for someone who didn't get to see their grandson as much as they wanted during the COVID. So they laid off blame. And, you know, compassion for someone who wants bodily autonomy. You know, there's a I don't know. But it's the small things. It's like, what is the small thing that that other person cares about? And do you care about that thing as well? Like those are the bridges.
Yep.
And don't argue with the people who are committed to arguing.
It's something that I shared with one of my clients the other day who's battling in the same way that we feel we are. I said, what did you tell your children when they went to school and somebody bullied them?
Yep.
Did you tell them to fight the bully? And her answer was no. I said, so what did you tell your child? And I told my child to find another circle.
Yep.
Find another circle that not necessarily is going to protect you, but it's going to allow you to move away because the bully wants your reaction.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't give the bully your reaction, actually, you're going to win.
Right.
And she said, do you really believe that? And I said, yes, because I was bullied growing up. And my mother would say it to me all the time. And I found myself, okay, well, I'm going to move over to this group.
Right.
And if there was a bully in that group, then I had to move on to another group. But it taught me how to deal with people, that instead of sitting there and arguing, because they're going to be louder than I am.
Yep.
And I may believe in what I'm saying, but I may not have all the facts. I have some of the history, but I can't tell you the dates and the people because that's just me. So if I can't stand up, and even with all that, the bully is still going to tell you you're wrong. So my message is, like you said, stop giving in, walk away. Don't engage when somebody posts something on your Facebook page. In fact, I just go ahead and I delete the message.
Yep.
Why read it? And why let people who are following me read it? They can get those messages on their own. I don't need to be the bearer of those words.
Do you know Heather Cox Richardson?
Yes.
Yeah. So she is brilliant if you're interested in the history going behind some of these movements. She is amazing at that, at giving that contextual story. There will be damage done. There already is. The only thing we can do is stand. Stand and not get pulled in ourselves. Because our outrage is their win. Don't give it to them. Just say no. Walk away, as you say. Or stand up. I am basically committed to, if I see something happening, I'm going to start filming. I'm going to call it out. I'm going to start asking questions because I'm a white woman. I have some level of protection. Not infinite, but more than many. And from my perspective, white women have some reparation to make. 53% of white women voted for Trump. That is not cool. That is not cool.
Well, and especially what the documentation shows about him when it comes to women.
Oh, yeah.
I was molested by a doctor. The doctor actually, we found out when we went to court, had been a Nazi doctor.
Oh my gosh.
He came to the US, hid all of his background. And somehow I knew that when it was happening to me. And when I reported it, I said, please, you got to look into this because this was not just an American doctor with a German accent. It took me a long time to get over it. But when I started hearing, and I know there have been other presidents who have been womenizers. I'm not,
Absolutely.
I hate to say men are men, but to some degree, men are men. But not to the degree, at least that we know, that this president has been.
Right.
And it scares me because if he had been in office when this happened to me, I wonder if I would have been taken seriously.
No,
because I
you wouldn't
remember
have.
going to court and being terrified. I was in a court with all men.
Yep.
There was one woman, my mother-in-law, came to support me. But it was terrifying.
Yep.
And yet, when it was proven that he had, because he finally admitted to it, and then I found out there were at least 23 other patients he had done this to.
Yep.
So how does a woman, I don't care if she's white, black, orange, it doesn't matter. How do you allow somebody who doesn't respect you to be your leader?
Well, I mean, that's why I have probably the most trouble with white women who voted for him, more than any other demographic. I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't understand why you would vote for someone who is going to do his level best to take away birth control pills. He is. He is. Because honestly, he doesn't care. Who doesn't care about women dying in parking lots in Texas? Doesn't care. The states which are most monstrous about these things also have the smallest and least strong networks of support. So this is basically the pro-force party. And so they're forcing women to give birth, and yet they don't provide support as they're forcing them. Food, training so that they can finish school or get a good job or whatever. Those states that are the worst with this give these women that they are forcing to give birth nothing
And who's
to
going to
help them.
who is going to financially take care of those children, especially if some of the government benefits are taken away? I
Right.
know when I was working for a private college, my first office was in the inner city of Cleveland. Many of my students were hard on their luck, but they could walk in and basically get financial aid and go to school. Many of the young women had children,
Yep.
and children were on Medicaid because of one illness or another, because they weren't getting proper medical care. And to no fault of mom, but they were young girls. They were 18, 19, early 20s. And I learned so much about that demographic that if we don't start supporting them, and
Yep.
I'm not necessarily saying give them money, but let's give them the training so they can go out and earn the money. Let's give them the training so they know how to take care of their children. Let's make the vaccines or whatever that we need to keep our children healthy and grow into healthy adults.
Right. Right. Exactly. I mean, if we can, a lot of why this happened, I think, is that the people who voted for him when he was saying the monstrous things that he's now delivering on said to themselves, this doesn't have anything to do with me. And I think that we each need to realize that each and every one of us, if one of us is harmed, anyone is harmed, it does have to do with us.
Yes.
It does have to do with us. That's basic, any faith, Christian, Jewish, Muslim principles. How you care for the least of mine is how you serve me. It goes across everything. And I think that we need to really take that in. All those people who voted for Trump saying that he didn't really mean the racist, sexist, xenophobic things. He just meant the things that they wanted to hear, except that the price of eggs is very high and the war continues in the Ukraine.
Yeah.
And he released 600 violent offenders into the streets of the country.
Yes.
But, aside from those things, if we can get to a point where, as a bridge, we realize that no matter what we look like and no matter who we are human, and as humans, we are mandated respect and caring.
Well, and we are responsible for each other.
Mm-hmm.
So, you may not necessarily be friends with your next door neighbor. You may maybe wave occasionally, but if their house were on fire,
Yep.
you'd be calling the fire department. You'd be knocking at the door. You may, without even thinking, run in to try to help them
Yep.
because that's what humanity is about.
Right.
And I think we need to stop and ask ourselves, are we living this life solely,
Mm-hmm.
or are there other people around us? And
Yep.
how do we make sure that not only are we safe, but they're safe? And again, you don't have to have the exact same beliefs that Alice and I are talking about, but you have to be human about it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I think Trump has done many, 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 many monstrous things. And I'm from New York. Anyone in New York and New Jersey knows exactly what those are. Um, and I think that the worst thing he did was he normalized cruelty. He normalized name calling and bullying. He normalized sexist and racist and xenophobic comments. He said, yeah, that's okay. I'll do it. And I'm the president. So you can do it. And in normalizing all those things, he divided us as human beings.
Yes.
And there's something called wilding. So a crowd of young people are much more likely to do something idiotic than one at a time.
Yes.
So he created this wilding crowd, this wilding movement, which is about cruelty. Because within that, it's like, oh, I have license to be cruel because the president says so. And that, in my opinion, is the bedrock worst thing he's done. Now, there will be horrific policies, already are. But this bedrock thing about being human and being inhumane, that's what's killing us.
So you did something today that I didn't even think about doing. And I want to share this with our listeners because those of you who are listening, it happened. We are recording this on January 30th. Last night, there was a horrific accident. A helicopter and a commercial airline collided over the Potomac River. And as of now, they are saying there are no survivors. Number one, we can't point the blame at anybody or anything because there there is no information yet. It's going to take months, from what I understand, even once they get the black boxes, once they see any of the recordings that went to the control tower, they're going to have to decipher it all. But even if somebody were to blame, that's not going to bring anybody back. And we're all hurting, and especially the families of those innocent individuals who have died. I didn't think about contacting my congressman, my senator, but you did this. So tell us what prompted you, because I think that's one thing that we all can do when something isn't right.
Yeah, I think that you empower your senator and your senators and your representative to act if you actually say what you think about what's going on. And as I said, I'm from New York. Trump is from New York. And so we've seen this playbook of his over decades. So he does something, makes a mess at something, then he seeks someone to blame or throw under the bus. So when the Hollywood thing, and he said that grab him by the pussy,
Right.
that they thought would tank the election. Billy Bush lost his job, lost everything. Trump became president. So his modus operandi is blame someone, throw someone under the bus. We saw this in the LA fires.
Yes.
Trump sought to blame Newsom for the water. So in this instance, with the plane crash, I called my senator's office 45 minutes before Trump got on the television. And I said, when he looks to blame the Democrats for this plane crash, I want you to be very loud about reminding the media that the Republicans hold all three branches of government. And in fact, Elon Musk pushed out the head of the FAA on January 20th, and Trump fired the inspector general who oversaw transportation, including air safety, on his second day. So it shouldn't be about blame. But this is what I said about Trump's inhumanity and cruelty. It's all about him. It's not about the either 67 or 68 people who lost those they loved. So if you see something that's not right, if you see something that is inhumane, illegal, or unconstitutional, call your representative, call your senator. Say, this is not right. I expect you to fight. Right now, I'm a Democrat. Democrats don't have the power to not get Trump's people confirmed. So I saw these two Army guys, an Army guy and an Army woman, walking through Penn Station. And I came millimeters close to saying, stay safe these next 4 years. Because Trump has just nominated. And the Republican senators have just confirmed the most unqualified by competency and character Department of Defense head this country has ever seen.
And he has no experience in the area. So,
Yep.
I don't like what they showed about his past. But if he had the experience, true experience in the area, I might say there may be a reason why we're choosing this person. But that's like with all of his cabinet to date. These are not people who have experience. Robert Kennedy has no experience being in charge of anything that has to do with our health.
Yep.
And
that was a hilarious, if you watch the hearing for him,
yes,
you will howl with laughter.
Well, I don't think he can speak properly. And I just found it like, what are you doing to your family's legacy?
Mm-hmm.
You are really killing it. And,
yep.
If you don't like your family, then change your name at least, because, you are connected to a family that cared about America.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it comes back to autonomy, right? But if you think about it, I think that people don't get into the weeds. And I think it's really important to get into the weeds. Like, kids died of measles and mumps. People wound up in iron lungs because of polio. So, okay, like vaccines, not like vaccines, I have my own opinion. But do we really want all those back? shingles. These are all vaccines that keep us from getting these things that have been almost eradicated. Do we really want them back? And I think that's the thing that people don't think about.
Well, and I think it's interesting because my husband, who has been interviewing in IT at hospitals, he must prove he has been vaccinated since the COVID vaccine came out. He must prove that he has the flu vaccine. Because of his age, he has to prove he has the RSV. And we do have them. But if he
Yep.
didn't, he wouldn't even be eligible to be interviewed. And I respect these hospitals for asking for that information. And just before we came on, one of the part-time things I do, I call on University Hospital here in the Cleveland area. And my job now says I have to prove that I am vaccinated, even though I have nothing to do with patients. And I thought, you know what? That's okay. I'm willing to prove it. And when I'm not feeling well, I wear a mask when I go in. And I probably should wear it all the time, but I don't think about it. But I do know that if I'm coughing or sneezing, that mask is on. I'm not going to share those germs with somebody else. So I guess what I'm asking our listeners, hate is a germ. And if we keep spitting it out, there's not going to be any kindness in this world. And we're sort of getting to that place. But I think if we go back to what Alison said right in the beginning, find your core and let that core just keep building and growing. And if you stay in that core, we're going to be somewhat protected over the next 4 years. And I think we're going to get people infiltrating into that core who were against this administration initially, because they're going to be hurt along the way. And I don't think it's worth any of us getting hurt. So, Alison, you have been phenomenal as always. And for those of you who listen to Grief Believe, Alison is one of our grief coaches, and she is on there regularly. And I always learn something new. And it's interesting. There are some people that will tell you certain things, and you go, oh, yeah, that may be true or not. Right from the first day that we podcasted together, I started doing Google searches on certain things that you would say, because it sounded like, God, that's great information, but I've never heard it before. And then it was like, oh, it's there. So you stay on top of things. And I think that is phenomenal. And I just want to wish you health and happiness in New York City, because I know you're about to see a lot of terrible things going on in that city with people being rounded up. So keep your eyes open, share with us as we move forward, and give my love to your mother-in-law, because she deserves it. 102, everybody. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.